You know, I'm going to give you a history lesson.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
Start laughing! And when I do, start fucking.
Also, y'all did some nasty-ass jokes on my ass, too.
Funny jokes and unfunny jokes come out of the same birth.
You fucking guys are unbelievable.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Why Are You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast, live from the Vaulted Podcast Studios. Today, I'm pleased to introduce to you the late, great Bob Saget. And with me, as always, Matt from Rhode Island here at Vaulted Podcast. Mike Harris with me as well. And no Craig this week, folks. You're lucky. So the boys are here, and I've wanted to do... It's funny, I actually did want to do a Bob Saget episode, and I was thinking, like, is there enough there? And I said, I'll just wait till he's dead. Who knows? That'll give me a few years to... And then, sure enough, he croaked. It's very weird because I was never... So today, basically, I want to do kind of a mix of talking about his career and also just remembering him and talking about why he was so, beloved and why his death was such a big deal to a lot of people. But it's strange because I just got into a kick. I was not a huge fan of Bob Saget's comedy per se. Mm-hmm. I liked him as a guy. I always liked him with Norm Macdonald, and when I would even just interviews in general, when I would hear him on Opie and Anthony or whatever, I enjoyed Bob Saget. And for whatever reason, in the last couple of months, I got into a kick. Maybe because he did such a great eulogy for Norm. He did like a really touching. You could tell he really loved Norm and was a genuine, like, kind, authentic guy, which, showed a lot about him, I thought. It was very authentic and genuine. And then I listened to his podcast with Gilbert Gottfried, and I started seeing clips. He was at Skankfest, which I was at. For whatever reason, Bob Saget was prevalent in my life the last few months. I don't know why. Yeah. So that's why I thought, like, maybe I should do a Saget episode, and I wasn't sure if there was enough there. And then I think, the entirety of his career and the dichotomy of the aspects of his career, as well as some of the stuff we've seen in the last just couple of weeks here after his death, are all very interesting. So I do think Saget's an interesting guy to talk about. But were you guys fans of his, or what did you think of his comedy?
I gotta be honest. I don't know if I've ever seen any of his stand-up before.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't really know, like, I know he's dirty. Yeah. It's like the whole big joke is like, oh, he plays your dad on TV, but he's your
Can you
buddy.
believe it?
Yeah.
The guy from Full House says, cunt? Who would have thought? So Saget's in an interesting place that I think even Rogan is in this spot right now. But you've seen a lot of guys over the years.
Yeah.
Howie Mandel, Tim Allen. There's a million people like this. Even probably like Ray Romano and Kevin James and guys like that, where they gain an audience that are like, oh, he's a stand-up? I didn't know he did comedy. But Saget would think of himself as a comedian.
As a comedian.
You know what I mean? Like the majority of the world knows him as, if you know who Bob Saget is, know him from Full House. Maybe America's Funniest Videos first, actually. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that worldwide, that's probably a more popular show. Mm-hmm. And then Full House, and then Entourage, maybe, and then the fact that he's a dirty stand-up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably fourth on the list.
Yeah.
So it's Saget had a very strange career, very interesting career, which we'll get to that maybe closer to the end, but I guess we'll just start at the beginning because he did live an interesting life. And it starts with he was a kid. He grew up in Philly, and then his family moved him out to California. Mm-hmm. And when he was in middle school, I believe, I don't think he was in high school yet. I think it was middle school. He was a big fan of the Three Stooges. And Larry Fine, who was wheelchair bound at the time, spoke at his middle school, and he found Larry Fine very interesting. And this fascinated me, just how much easier things were in the 60s or 70s, whatever. Yeah. He had his mom drive him out to the nursing home that Larry Fine was in, and played him old Stooges tapes, and Larry Fine would tell him stories, and
awesome.
like they had some sort of a relationship. But like as the way Bob Saget tells us it is, like he couldn't move or anything, so I would just play him old Stooges clips and be like, "Isn't this interesting? You guys were hilarious." So now that is my goal to one day, whenever Larry David is no longer lucid, I'm just gonna make him watch. You know, the show really did lose something when you left, Larry. The last 2 seasons aren't the same. He's just sitting there, lifeless.
Go over to Mel Brooks' house and do that. Him and Carl Reiner have movie nights. You can watch Blazing Saddles with him.
Right.
I'm sure they'll let you in.
That's just so funny though, like how we learned like a few months ago that the Stooges just had no confidence in themselves. They're like, oh yeah, random middle school kid wants to come and hang out. Sure, come on by.
I didn't even think of that. That's how humbled the Stooges were. It's like, well,
beaten down
I guess
they
I
were.
have to sit here with a young Bob Saget and spin a few yarns with him. So then Saget was interested in, I guess he wanted to become a doctor first, and which would have fit more in line with the Full House persona that he has, straight-laced kind of a guy. But I guess an English teacher told him to get into film, and that's why he went the route of film, but also fell in love with stand-up. And I don't know,
did Patch Adams say cunt?
right? Yeah, right. But he, you know, being a fan of the Stooges and things like that, he was a guy who loved comedy forever. And I think you can tell that, oddly enough, even though he wasn't a physical comedian, I feel like you see a Stooges type of influence with him, where he liked kind of, you know, silly, corny shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's what Bob Saget really liked.
Right.
So I think when you call him this dirty, edgy comedian, what he really did was tell dirty dad jokes.
That's fair.
You know, kind of similar to, I find him to be like a less funny Gilbert Gottfried.
All right.
You know what I mean? Like, Gilbert is all, you know, raunchy dad joke type of shit.
Right.
And I think Saget is kind of a different version of that. He played his guitar and stand-up.
Oh, that's right.
And, you know, I found it to be kind of a cornball, but like an interesting cornball. You know what I mean? Like, and there's room as I've gotten older. I think Saget would have been a guy, like if I was around at his peak, I would have been like, fuck him, he's a hack. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, there should be room for that.
Yeah.
For guys that are just telling, you know, silly dick jokes that aren't making a political stance and, you know, telling us like it is.
Yeah.
Like, there should be a lot more room for guys like Bob Saget.
Just want to have fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is, I do wonder if Saget had any stand-up fans. You know what I mean? Like, was his show entirely people that wanted to see Danny Tanner say fuck? Or were there people that are like, I never really liked Full House, but I'm here to see the stand-up of Bob Saget.
Stand-up of Bob Saget.
And I don't know what the answer is to that, because I think it's impossible to say, because he was so amazingly famous before anyone knew who he was. You know what I mean? Like,
that's a great way to put that. Yeah,
you know, he was astonishingly famous before you knew what he was as a stand-up. So before we get into his time at Full, where are we, Matt? Did I miss anything before we talk about the CBS morning show he was on?
No, yeah, you're right in tune with that. Yeah, CBS morning program before he got Full House in '87.
Yeah. So this was a time
Wake
where
Up San Francisco.
Yeah, where now it's funny. That's basically what he was on.
I know, it's so funny.
And I don't even know. So I went and watched an episode of this, looking to pull a clip from it. And I think he was just like, his role was essentially like when Stuttering John was on The Tonight Show. Like, he announces it. Maybe they brought him out for a few wacky bits, but it's just like, ladies and gentlemen, the CBS morning show. And it was like, I think it was their first attempt at Good Morning America.
Yeah.
Like, it was supposed to be their, you know,
Today Show.
Yeah, competition to the Today Show. But it seemed like a little wackier maybe. And I guess that's where Saget fit in. And it's just interesting at that time because now, like, I'm trying to think of the...
well, don't most talk shows like that have like a warm-up comedian that comes out like
It's
to make the crowd happy.
It's possible he was that as well.
They're like, we like the cut of this guy's gym. Let's give him a couple moments of airtime.
Yeah, and you see that on. If you ever watched the show Crashing on HBO,
Yes.
Pete Holmes' show,
Yeah.
he was like a warm up act for like the Rachel Ray show, or something like that.
It was Rachel Ray. Yeah.
Yeah, so all those TV shows, The Tonight Show, or even game shows have that type of shit where you hire a comedian, and that's a good gig for a comedian.
Absolutely.
But Saget was also on the show, which is a little weird.
They're probably like, yeah, we like his hair. It's nice and feathered.
Yeah.
Let's put him on.
Well, Saget's such an interesting example of the 70s and 80s, I think, and becoming famous or getting successful in comedy at that time. Because now, if I'm trying to think of the exact right name, but I don't know, Tim Dillon, let's say, if Tim Dillon took a role as a TV dad. Or as, the host of, he replaces Rob Dyrdek on Ridiculousness. You'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? This is not the guy I know. But I think in the 70s and 80s, you got to remember there's, 3 channels.
Yeah.
There's a few radio stations that maybe you could get on or whatever. But the roads to getting notoriety were so limited back then.
Yeah.
That I think in some ways it was easier. You didn't have to be as, nuanced or creative or anything. However, it was also more difficult in the sense that, like, if Bob Saget doesn't take this morning show job, where's he going to go?
Nobody. We're not talking about him now.
We're not talking about him now, and maybe he doesn't even pay his bills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe, because as we learned, for a long time, the Comedy Store wasn't exactly paying the rent. And quick side note, actually, he was telling a story. We'll play a piece of his interview with Howie Mandel from just a few weeks ago, as we record this anyways. And he talked about in there how Mitzi Shore at one time said he wasn't funny, told him he wasn't funny. And it all had to do with, he talked about I didn't include that clip, did I, Matt?
I don't know if you did.
I thought the story was too long and convoluted, but he tells a story about someone who I believe to be Argus Hamilton. I'm not sure if that's the right guy, but basically someone that Mitzi was very close to that got all kinds of fucked up, and Bob Saget was supposed to like watch after him. And it's an interesting story. Go listen to that episode of the Howie Mandel show if you want, because Saget's telling this story about how he was this caring guy and like was very concerned for Argus Hamilton, but like Argus got sick, so that caused a strife with Mitzi Shore. It's weird to see how, like, because things were so personal back then, there was a lot of good to that because Mitzi could take care of you, but there was also a lot of bad to that because if you had a grudge with someone, then that just meant you weren't getting on stage.
Right.
Whereas now things are a lot more corporatized and based on, how many fucking Twitter followers you have.
Exactly.
So there's good and bad to all of that, But he spent a few months on the morning show and then knew someone at ABC who thought he was right for Full House to play Danny Tanner, thought he was the perfect guy, which again is interesting because back then it could be like if you just fit the mold, if you were the right look or, had the right tone of voice or just fit whatever casting choice they wanted, it didn't matter if you told dick jokes on stage. And he wasn't incredibly raunchy in his early stand-up.
Yeah.
But he does have elements of... Do we have his early stand-up, Matt?
Yeah, we do.
Let's play a little of that just to get a vibe. Like, he's not crazy dirty, but you can see a little bit of... If he did this now and you were making Full House, you would say, probably not this guy.
But that's also... You were talking about there's nobody, like, tweeting out, like, hey... This guy,
look at what he did.
This guy, Danny Tanner, said something really mean.
As I've always said, Michael Richards ruined it for all of us, let's hear a little bit of early Saget.
Thank you. Guys, you're a wonderful audience. You really are. I'm not just kissing up. I'm really not. I swear. I'm slobbering all over you is what I'm doing because I need you to like me real bad because I have no act and I have no life and I have no future. I'm serious. My mom is Gumby, my dad is Pokey, and I'm Mr. Potato Head. So I talk real fast. If you have any drugs, take them now. I'm serious. I'm not funny, but I am quick. That's the problem I have with women, too. But it's good to be here. It really is. And you're a great crowd. I'm not just kissing up again. It's the second time I've done it. I just want to take a jacuzzi with you and throw in a toaster. I'm not kidding. I've never been this happy. But you're a great crowd, and I care about all of you individually. I just want to have sex with you right now. I'm serious. But I can. I'm working right now.
I mean, we talk about influences. There's a tremendous amount of Robin Williams there.
I was thinking Kevin Nealon, too.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they were contemporaries, though.
I think
so
they
maybe
were.
not influences, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know, you hear like Subliminal Man, like that kind
Nealon
of shit.
was on Weekend Update
Yeah.
while Saget was on Full House. I
That's
think.
right.
So they probably were coming up at the same time. But but even that's, we'll talk about other guys that have we'll talk about Geraldo in a future episode, where Geraldo has influences like Dave Attell and Colin Quinn, who are only a few years older than he was.
Yeah.
So you are influenced by a lot of those guys, but I see a lot of Robin Williams in that. Where
definitely.
I think clearly that's all written, but feels like stream of consciousness, and he's being wacky and silly and talking fast, and you don't know where he's going next, you know. And the reason I find that interesting is because, like I said, I consider that clean material, more or less. He
nowadays,
he has sex jokes and everything, but like in 1987. If that is on Twitter, people are saying, "Oh, we can't have that on Friday." What is it? TGIF, you know. So Saget gets chosen as Danny Tanner on Full House, and full disclosure, I do not understand the romance that this country has with Full House. It is so bizarre to me. I think it's like one of the worst written shows of all time. Were you a kid that grew up on Full House?
Yeah, I was, but like I agree. I don't know. I think it was just such a product of the time.
First of all, Uncle Joey was so damaging to stand up. It's amazing to watch the character of Uncle Joey and be like, that's how they saw stand-ups? Like, this is after Pryor and Carlin were hugely successful, and even like Rickles were hugely successful comedians. This is what you think of stand-up? The guy with the rubber chicken and the arrow through his head?
Fozzie Bear, come to life.
That's exactly what Uncle Joey was.
That's how I always thought. I was a huge fan of the Muppets, and when I saw him, I was like, oh, he's just
Fozzie Bear.
He's just copying Fozzie Bear. I was like, this is bullshit.
The guy's doing Woody Woodpecker impressions.
Yeah, he did like a Bullwinkle impression.
Bullwinkle, and
He had like Ranger Joe.
It was the worst, and I feel bad for Dave Coulier because I don't know I have no idea what Dave Coulier's stand-up is like.
No.
But I think of him as Rocky and Bullwinkle,
as Joey,
Uncle Joey.
Uncle Joey. What
was
his last name?
Joey. God damn it, I can't remember.
Uncle Joey.
Tell us on Twitter.
I mean,
folks.
Dave Coulier is famous for being Uncle Joey and for dumping Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
But I have no idea what Dave Coulier's life or career is like because that's how I think of him.
Gladstone.
Joey Gladstone. That's right.
But regardless of what I thought it was real cornball shit and like over the top schmaltz.
It was.
Absolutely, it was.
But that's what family programming was in the late 80s and early 90s. I guess. They were on the tail end of every sitcom having a very special episode.
Yeah, the Norman Lear era of sitcoms.
And they seemed like almost all very special episodes. Like a lot of the episodes, taught you a valuable lesson.
Well, you had mentioned the quote from Norman Lear in that episode where they were like, "Oh, the original sitcom writers wrote from their experiences."
Yes,
and then these guys all write from watching TV. I think the Miller Boyette era of TV, which was started by like Full House and like Family Matters and stuff. I think that's like the first generation,
first start of that.
So you're absolutely right. It's just over the top schmaltz. Yeah.
Full House. And again, I have if you liked it as a kid, I have zero problem with that. If you watch it as an adult, I do question it. Like it is weird to go back and that's a horrible show to watch as an adult because the writing is for 5-year-olds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, Mike. That is one of the early examples of people writing based on what TV taught them,
exactly,
rather than their own experiences. Now, we might have to go back on. Oh no, never mind. We debunked this theory. There's a rumor out there that the first episode the mother is killed on the show, but I think we've debunked that. I don't think that's true. No. So he gets Full House. And then 2 years later, I think he gets Full House in '87. I think he gets America's Funniest Home Videos in '89.
Correct.
And these are monster shows. I remember, were they both on Friday nights? I can't remember that.
No.
But I remember staying up and watching TGIF with Full House and watching America's. I didn't watch Full House all the time, but I was aware of it. But America's Funniest Home Videos, I watched every week,
all the time.
And that is. Again, talk about influences, and maybe Saget comedically doesn't have. Am I saying words wrong? Did I say comedically? comedically.
We're moving on from it.
Comedically, I don't know how many children Bob Saget has. You know what I mean? Where like you hear a lot of Attell's or
Bob
Todd
Saget
Berry's
coaching tree.
Yeah, I don't know how many Bob Sagets are out there, but the reason for Tosh.0 and Ridiculousness, Web Junk, all of those shows is America's Funniest Home. Like Rob Dyrdek is on MTV 24 hours a day now because of Bob Saget.
Because of Bob Saget.
And it's so weird. It's so weird that Ridiculousness and Tosh.0 exist. Well, at least Daniel Tosh is funny.
Yeah.
Rob Dyrdek is. It's weird that show is as popular as it is.
Yeah.
Because it's basically. You don't feel like searching through YouTube? Your algorithm hasn't corrected itself
we did
yet
it for you.
You don't know the right keywords? Then watch Ridiculousness.
Here's a dummy, a girl dummy, and a black guy.
But America's Funniest Home Videos was that because that didn't exist at the time. It was amazing. You never saw Dad getting hit in the nuts and falling off the roof while he's hanging the Christmas lights.
With football in the groin, had a football in the groin.
Oh my God, it was unbelievable. You couldn't believe what you were seeing. It was, especially as a kid or a family together. When I was 5 years old, 6 years old, that was the closest to edgy comedy I was watching. Was, grandma said fuck and it gets bleeped out on America's Fun. And that's hilarious. It's wacky. She's tripping on New Year's,
It's slapstick comedy.
You know what's funny that like inadvertently created? It created like now every single one of those clip shows that happens or did happen like early 2000s is like, please don't send us tapes. Like, please don't send us tapes
Jackass?
of you hurting yourself. Please don't.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because back then it was like, oh, I have this funny video from like the early 80s.
Or you could even say you bring that disclaimer's on Jackass. You could say that America's Funniest Home Videos created Jackass.
Oh,
I mean, completely. Yeah. And just created YouTube. Like, I think a lot of the influence for YouTube existing comes from America's Funniest Home Videos,
I do have to say, though, I always used to think about this, like, what a minefield being the guy who chose the clips must have had to walk through.
Right.
Like, because you're like, all right, is this going to be... somebody dying? Like, what is happening?
I mean,
like, they probably got so much stuff submitted to them that was horrifying.
Oh, yeah. Because they just got tapes. They weren't editing these reel-to-reel tapes, these 8mm tapes or whatever they were. Like, they had to send them all in. And
like,
then the people there had to watch through, like,
they'd watch them
porn
all.
And, like,
like death, like faces of death, like severed limbs. Dude, I can't imagine the shit that they must have gotten where they're like, oh, this is let's see what this one is. Oh, my God.
Well, it's funny. We'll talk about, next week, we'll talk about Sex for Sam with Opie and Anthony and some of the decisions that went wrong there. But whoever you're referring to at ABC, whoever's job that was one, decapitation away.
Exactly.
Like, hey, this is a great idea. Let's put this on the air. So that is walking a fine line as far as keeping that a family-friendly show. And then I mentioned the
decapitation.
Stooges.
That's not a very fine line, Mike.
Obviously, I'm being, I'm exaggerating. I'm being hyperbolic. But you talk about the Stooges influence. I think that's very clear here.
Oh, hell yeah.
And you can reduce that to, like, again, I've heard there's a lot of different, not so much now. Now Nikki Glazer's singing songs about him and things. But, while he was alive, there was a lot of people looking at Bob Saget like, he was a guy that said, that's gotta hurt when you get hit in the nuts. You get a rake to the face. But there is a skill to that where, like, being that voice that makes people comfortable while they're watching people humiliate themselves. There is a skill to that.
Absolutely.
And that's a lot of Three Stooges influence and other slapstick people from that area. Clearly coming through in Bob Saget. So it's funny, like, I don't think Full House was one of the great acting, one of the great master classes in acting that we've ever seen. And I don't know that America's Funniest Home Videos was necessarily the hardest show to host, but there is a value to both of those and a skill to both of them that a lot of people don't have. And one wrong move, and we're not talking about Bob Saget on America's Funniest Home Videos. And he's a guy that was in our homes for 15 years. He was on 2 of the biggest shows in the country for over a decade, which is pretty wild. America's Funniest Home Videos, I think he hosted for 9 years.
It went till 97, 89 to 97.
Yeah. And I think they were both in the top 30 on television at that time.
No question.
I'm pretty sure America's Funniest Home Videos was like a king. You know what I mean? Like
tent pole.
He's remembered for Full House, but like that show was a fucking monster.
Yeah. It was.
So then he had tragedy did strike, unfortunately, in 1994, and his sister passed away from scleroderma. And I shudder to say her name because I know the Very Good Show boys would have a field day with this. Her name was Gay Saget, and I don't know how people missed that one, but apparently there were different names at the time, and whatever. And but she passed away from scleroderma, and Bob, again, this goes to like kind of his purity as a guy, and just the sweet man that he seemed to be. Every interview, I don't remember hearing Saget do an interview without bringing up the scleroderma foundations that he worked with and things like that. Like, he dedicated his life. And it's a horrible... actually, do we have him talking about it?
We do.
I forget.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's hear him describe it rather than me babble.
This is a recent interview with CBS Miami.
Yeah.
She had a lot of fatigue. Her body, she said it felt like her skin was on fire. She went to regular medical doctors that said that it could be lupus, it could be mental illness, it could be Epstein-Barr.
So it was sort of the litany.
They named everything except what it was.
So yeah, it's a hardening of the skin, and there's all sorts of variations, but it sounds like a really brutal disease.
It's super painful.
And Saget's done a great job. I know what scleroderma is only because of Bob Saget.
Yeah.
Now, I'm doing nothing about it, but someone might be somewhere. So he's done a good job of spreading awareness for sure. And then he made a movie in 1997. He directed a movie, For Hope, made-for-TV movie about his late sister. And he did have a lot of his other sister died of a brain hemorrhage.
Jesus.
And later in his parents died at a relatively older age, but not like younger than they should have been. You know what I mean? Like they had years left. So he did have a lot of tragedy in his family, and yet maintained this sort of happy, seemingly happy lifestyle. You know what? I don't have any idea what he was like behind closed doors, but always seemed like a very nice, caring guy.
Yeah, I mean, especially now that he's passed, I can't remember a time of like any comic saying anything bad about him.
Never.
Anytime he ever got brought up,
we'll
they
get
were
to
like,
one.
Oh, he's a nice guy.
We will get to one. They're not comics, but people took out of context and tried to make him like not so nice a guy. But we'll get to that in a bit. First, now I think we'll have some fun here with. All
right.
Are we missing anything before we get to the legendary dirty work?
No, I have some more of his early stand-up, but we can play him later if you want.
No, let's hear that now.
Yeah? You want
Yeah.
All right, 1 second. So yeah, I have a few more clips of his early stand-up. That was like right when the one I played before was right when Rodney put him up there.
Yeah.
So here's a continuation.
Okay.
But I'm a happy guy because I got married. Married my girlfriend of 7 years. At her age, I'm going to jail. No, I did. I really am in love. I told her tonight, I said, when I come home, I want to make love to you badly. And she said, at least you don't overestimate yourself. But I'm nuts over her. She's this tall. It's my dad's joke. I'm sorry you laughed at that. I've lost respect for you. I really have.
So there's. I think he is funny.
Yeah.
And I think he's not necessarily what I like. I go more towards people with like
something to say.
Yeah, and like Louis or Chappelle or Burr or whatever. But like the guys I loved when I was a kid, Regan, Gaffigan. I think Bob Saget kind of fits that bill. And people now, I think we've gone too far in remembering him as this filthy comedian.
Yeah,
like the words he said were dirty, but he was never saying anything that would get him canceled. And I think that's why he was able to be. Like people say now, and I think I even said it, that you wouldn't be able to be Bob Saget and Danny Tanner. You wouldn't be able to be the Bob Saget the comedian and Danny Tanner, which is true in a way. But I think this is true of Gilbert Gottfried also, where the reason Gilbert Gottfried was, able to play the parrot in Aladdin, and the reason Danny Tanner or Bob Saget was able to play kids shows, was that they weren't saying anything quote unquote harmful. They weren't taking on those issues. And I think there is something nice about that now we get too lost in needing to have a message.
Yeah.
Like Hannah Gadsby says, if you're not delivering a message with a powerful punch, then you're not a comedian, which is such dog shit.
Absolute dog shit.
I think Bob Saget is so much more of a comic than someone like Hannah Gadsby because he doesn't have that message. He's telling jokes.
He's trying to make people laugh.
Yeah. And you can say that's corny dad humor, but I think there's a place for that.
At least it's humor.
Exactly. And I've gone away from, like, when I was a kid and wanted to be edgy and everything, I'd be like, fuck Jeff Dunham and people like that. And I would not pay to see Jeff Dunham now.
No.
But, like, he's making a lot of people laugh only from stand-up.
I love Jeff Dunham.
Well, there you go. He's making simpletons like Matt laugh.
I love Jeff Dunham.
So, but I think there's a place for that where, like, Jeff Dunham didn't even get famous from something. Like, him from stand-up. Yeah. And I think there's something to, even though that's not how Bob Saget got famous, people aren't paying to see. There's a reason Stormy Daniels' stand-up career didn't last particularly long. You know what I mean? She had nothing to say.
Her lay-down career is even longer.
Well, that's fine. And much more successful. Stick to that, sweetheart.
Yeah.
But like Storm and Jeremy Piven plays comedy clubs and shit like that now. But the reason they're not playing theaters the way Bob Saget was for a sustained run is because Bob Saget is a genuine comic.
Yeah.
And was trying to make people laugh and not just trying to capitalize on whatever name he made. And so I like that a lot. Like I always liked that about Bob Saget. And I've come to appreciate him more. Like he has, there was some bit of his I found online where it's one of those old, like, limericks. It's a song where every punchline is supposed to be dirty. Yeah. Like you think it's supposed to rhyme with, bunt.
Yeah.
So you think it's coming and then it's clean.
Yeah.
And that's the song. And I think that kind of shows what Bob Saget was as a comedian.
Yeah.
Where we have now gone too far in blowing up how filthy he was. Like he would tell dirty jokes, but I think they were kind of for the Full House audience that grew up.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
Fair.
You know?
That's a good way to put that.
So what do we got now?
Can we go back for a second, though?
Please.
I did not know Stormy Daniels was doing stand-up.
Oh, yeah.
That happened? I had no idea that
I can't say what she was playing comedy clubs.
No shit.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was supposed to be funny or what it was, but she was playing comedy clubs for a while. Huh. Yeah, at the peak of her...
Comedians do strip clubs, so,
Yeah. What's next one?
I have another quick early stand-up.
Okay.
This is a good one. I like this one.
But right now I'm in no position to have a kid because I'm standing up and I'm alone. I want to have a kid, but we've been trying to have a kid. Well, my wife's trying. I just lay there. But I won't breastfeed. Damn it, I won't do it. Men can breastfeed. Did you know that? I read that. Okay, I made it up. No, I read it. I wrote it down and then I read it. I believe everything I read. Men can breastfeed, but you have to actually tape cans of evaporated milk to your chest. You give the baby an opener, I remember when I was just a little baby, my mother was looking down and she said, "Bob, you've had enough." And I said, "Don't act like you don't like it, Smart kid.
So to me, that's the interesting dichotomy of Bob Saget, is that right there, everything you heard is too dirty. Those would not be jokes on Full House or America's Funniest Home Videos. Like they're too dirty for network TV, particularly in 1987.
Yeah.
However, that's nothing that would get you canceled today. Nothing that would, no one would bat an eye at any of those jokes today. If fucking Anthony Jeselnik told those or whatever, it'd be a little too clean for him probably. But like no one would sneeze at that.
But the Humpty Hump outfit he had on. Holy shit.
Now that maybe you should take issue with. But it was the time, man.
Yeah.
No, but my point is, it's interesting because no one would take issue with that now. However, I don't think Bob Saget in 2022, if he released that, which it would be released now, and that would be like, him doing the Tonight Show or whatever, that would be all on YouTube and everything. So you'd be able to find it very easily. And if he was up for a kid's role, you would see that and say, no chance, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Whereas, the odds of take today, try and put Full House in 2022, we're creating it. We're casting it right now. And we say, oh, there's a clip of Bob Saget online making, jokes about fucking and things like that. Oh, we can't put him on our TV. Well, why? An 8-year-old's never going to find that clip.
Do you think that's why Wayne Brady doesn't like the Chappelle show?
I think that's exactly why. Yeah, because people, his audience has found it now.
Yeah,
and oh my goodness. Whereas I really don't think kids watching Full House are going to find that. And if they find it and know what it means, then they've already found something else like it.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. So that's where.
That's a good point.
Well, and there's no megaphone like Twitter. Like there's no.
Yes.
It's like these isolated incidents. Like no one's going to the radio station to like broad. You know what I mean? It's there and it's there.
That's where I get mad about shit. Like the example I always use is Shane Gillis being on SNL.
Oh yeah.
Because they say you're right. Maybe Shane Gillis shouldn't have been on SNL. If you want to make it,
that's because Shane Gillis is funny.
Because he's funny, but also because if you want to make it theater club, then you're right. Shane Gillis doesn't fit that mold. If you want everyone on that show to be from the exact same background and have the exact same jokes and the exact same thoughts about every subject, then you're right. Shane Gillis shouldn't be on that show. But could he have made SNL funny? Sure. Now, could Bob Saget have brought a funny element to Full House? Sure. But he wouldn't have been given that opportunity now. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's why a lot of the cancel culture stuff makes me, so outraged. Because it's not the high-profile things where it's like, oh, yeah, well, Shane's doing well now. He's headlining. He's got a sketch show that's doing very well on YouTube. That's not the point. The point is, who knows what he could have done with SNL?
We're missing out. We're losing out on things that could have been awesome.
That could have been amazing. That could have changed.
Because we're not giving people a chance. Yeah.
Shane Gillis playing Trump on SNL could have changed how society viewed him.
That was one of the best impressions of anybody I've ever seen anyone do.
It could have done what Will Ferrell did to George Bush and make him a mockery. Instead, we all had to take it very seriously.
Yeah.
And we had to put serious Alec Baldwin on SNL doing Trump. You know what I mean? So that's what I think Saget kind of personifies that point perfectly.
Yeah.
Where he's not this filthy, horrible guy. In fact, he seems like a great guy.
Yeah.
Seems like a very kind, generous guy.
So everybody says about him.
But he would not get a kid's show today.
No.
Bob Saget, the name would, but an up-and-coming Bob Saget certainly wouldn't.
I mean, even Gilbert Gottfried, who played the parrot. He can't be the Aflac goose anymore.
Right.
Like they fired him from that, and he said a word on those commercials.
Yeah.
He got hired because he has a funny voice.
You wouldn't know. He's not saying Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah. It's just a guy doing a funny voice on a commercial. You don't even see him.
Yeah. And who was canceling their insurance because Gilbert Gottfried?
Right.
Well, everyone in Japan, it sounded like.
Oh, really? Oh, well.
So there was kind of a reason for that one, I guess. But anyways. So now we get to Dirty Work, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So Bob Saget directs Dirty Work, which I think there's a lot of good that came out of that, but there's also a lot of hilarity in the choice of Bob Saget making, I guess For Hope was his directorial debut. And that led to, that horribly sad TV movie led to Norm Macdonald saying, I think this is the guy for my comedy with me and Artie Lang. But there are a few great clips of Norm and Saget promoting Dirty Work. I think the first one's from Letterman, right?
Yeah.
What a classic.
So this is Norm on Letterman going out to promote Dirty Work.
I thought this was interesting. You know who directed the movie? Of course you know. You were in it. Bob TV blooper Bob Saget. Bob TV blooper Saget.
Yeah, he directed it.
Yeah. Now, can he direct?
No, not at all.
Was it just a lot of people getting hit with a rake and stuff? Just people falling down at weddings and that kind of thing?
It was very comfortable with him as a director, though, because he would give me acting notes. He'd go, I think you should do it this way. And then I'd go, I've seen you on that Full House. What are you talking about?
Norm is the greatest. I do my best to shoehorn any Norm clips into every episode, but this one came up pretty naturally.
I love how Letterman gets such a kick out of him.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good.
And I just love Letterman jabbing Saget in there. Bob TV blooper Saget. But that's the great thing about Saget and the reason I loved him. Because again, I wouldn't call myself a Saget fan, but the reason I loved him was his vibe. And he loved that shit.
Yeah, he was in on the joke.
He would, if he was watching Letterman that night, he would have been cackling. He loved it. Actually, there's a story, I didn't include it because I don't think we can play the word, but Joe List told a story of he opened for Saget once, and it was in New Hampshire, I think, and they the crowd is going nuts. They're waiting to see Bob Saget. And maybe the Full House audience wasn't quite the stereotype we're thinking of them as, because they were like, "Are you ready?" They set it up in the worst possible way. "Are you ready for Bob Saget?" And everyone's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "All right, well, first, here's Joe List." And he comes out on stage, and Joe List does a few of his jokes, and he's getting booed. And then he said, someone yelled, "Hey, word that rhymes with Saget. Bring out Saget." And Joe List goes, "That's pretty good." And he turns to his left, and Saget is on the floor laughing. Just watching this kid eat it in front of him. So that's the charm and the thing I loved about Saget, not the whole, family AFV Full House of it all, but like that angle that he was a true, no matter what you think of his comedy, he was a genuine comic and loved that stuff.
Comedy reverence.
And this is another clip of him and Norm promoting. I think this is on Regis and Kathy Lee, right?
Looks like it. The video quality is not great from YouTube, but yeah, it looks like Regis.
I think they're on Regis and Kathy Lee, and promoting Dirty Work. And this is a great story. Although I'll have to correct Norm in the telling of this, oddly enough, because it's even funnier than Norm portrays it. But let's hear this first.
He said, "I'll do it."
I don't remember.
He said, Rickles meets him and he goes,
Hold on one second. Sorry, I should have set it up better. Rickles obviously was in Dirty Work. Yeah. He had 2 scenes, I think. Yeah. And he was just coming off of Casino. And he was talking to Martin Scorsese about the next project he was doing.
He said, "I'll do it."
I don't remember.
He said, Rickles meets him and he goes, because he did Casino with Martin Scorsese. Sure. And he goes, "I just talked to Martin and I told him you were my next director." And he went, "Ah!"
Oh, that's He left me a message. He called me at my office and he said, "I don't understand." He left this message. He said, "I hit 2 in pound and I hit 3 in pound. I don't know how your Jew spaceship works."
You didn't have that in the clip, but after I was like, I have to just leave.
I do like. I'm glad you. And of course, we got to do a Rickles episode someday because he's the greatest. But the way I believe Norm got that line a little off because Minahan's referenced this on KMS before, and I think he's right because I swear I've heard this clip but couldn't find it anywhere. I would have had to go through every Rickles appearance on Letterman because I wasn't sure if it was in 97, 98 or years later. But I believe the actual line is, I told Marty Scorsese that my next project was directed by Bob Saget. The man grabbed his chest, which I think is a funnier way to deliver it. But
I always forget that Casino was in like 95.
Yeah.
I always think it was like an earlier movie, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's another thing about Saget is the greats like Rickles and Norm loved him.
Oh yeah.
Because I think he was able to play along with that. And to Saget's credit here, sure, we can joke. Saget may have not been the premier director that would have put Dirty Work on the map, but if you want to keep that Norm's project, I think you need Saget as the director.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I have no idea how he impacted the film, if he made it any better as the director. I don't even know how much you needed a director on Dirty Work. But you put that in... Bob Saget is enough of a name that a studio is going to be all right with it.
Yeah.
And if you put any other name in that role or an established director, you're not getting the Dirty Work that we know. No. And that was great about Saget is that he understood comedy. What do we have next, Matt?
The roast.
Of course. So, I mean, again... I want to shoehorn everyone knows the Norm set from...
This is one of my favorite things.
Everyone knows the Norm set.
On planet Earth.
There's more about that roast I want to talk about. But for now, we'll just listen to the greatness of Norm Macdonald.
I fucking love this.
Bob Saget roast. Another seminal moment in my life.
So I think that Bob should join the Ku Klux Klan. And that's not because he's racist. He's not racist. It's just that he'd look a lot better with a hood over his head on account of his face. How can you not get that?
I think, it wasn't in that clip, but I think the next line is your fucking dog face.
Yeah, your fucking dog face.
Which he threw that in because Norm told Saget he was going to do that. And Saget was like, I don't know, maybe people want to, people are so edgy on that show.
Yeah.
Throw a few fucks in there. So he goes, you're a fucking dog face. But Norm was amazing on that roast.
Oh, so
But
great.
something that's forgotten about is Gilbert Gottfried on that roast, who was also hysterical.
Unbelievably good set.
Do you want these clips before the Norm show with Bob Saget?
Yes. Yeah, just because we're on the roast, we'll get back to that. We do have more Norm, folks, so stay tuned. But Gilbert on that roast
so
had a
good.
hilarious set. It's weird. I can't find the full set online. Like, this is just clipped up weird.
Yeah.
But you get the general vibe of hysterical. And I mean, I wouldn't think you would need to break down what makes that funny. But obviously, it's that Bob Saget has such a clean-cut image, and Gilbert going up there and saying that over and over, that he raped and killed a girl in 1990, is fucking hysterical. And of course, the other element is it's not something you would, if it happened, you wouldn't joke about it on a roast. However...
Here's the other half to it. You want to hear it?
So Bob Saget loved that and loved Gilbert very much.
He was rolling in his chair.
He was laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
Yet, some people tried to ruin that. And I think this came when, so these roasts were not too distantly uploaded to Netflix. So it may have been around that time when maybe a new generation got a hold of them or whatever it was. Or it was just, fuckery on YouTube. But Bob Saget tells a tale on Howie Mandel. This was just a few weeks ago, actually. Bob Saget on Howie Mandel talking about his experience years after that famous roast.
But at my roast, we're back to Gilbert. I was just dawned on me that I didn't finish that one thought, which is he said terrible things about me over and over again. And that was his joke. The joke was the same statement over and over again, that I did something horrible to a girl, that I murdered and did other things. But he said it like 30 times. There's no truth to the rumor. So what happened was this terrible person on YouTube, not a nice person, a couple of people did it. They took clips from that. They took an excerpt from a book, and I had gone on a radio show in the morning, Opie and Anthony, where you say stuff you don't want to say in the morning to shock jock, not unlike, Dirty Sanchez, that kind of thing. They get you to say that stuff.
Right.
And I don't like my behavior on that. And then I told a story in a book, and what else did I do? One other thing, I can't remember. I did three things that these people quoted as me being guilty of something. And because the comedians were trashing me on the roast and saying that I was a terrible person, especially the people that I worked with that I loved and I'm still close with, all these kids, Gen Z on TikTok, say that I am a murderer and a terrible person. And I was like, do I need to sue Gen Z?
So you see why certain guy, and I saw Saget talk about this in a few different interviews, where this really hurt him. And this goes to the sensitivity of him and he's a caring, genuine, nice guy. Mm-hmm. And that really hurt him. That it can't, this became like kind of a campaign on Twitter. It wasn't very big, but in his world, I'm sure it was all consuming.
Yeah.
That people were saying legitimately that he raped and killed a girl in 1990. And I think the other thing that they used, I could be wrong about this, but was like his character in Entourage that was doing blow and fucking hookers and shit like that, which is an exaggerated version of his act. That was the idea, is taking the fact that he's a dirty guy, completely exaggerating it. And so the two things that let people know Saget was a very dirty comedian. The first one was his line in Half-Baked, where the scene is Chappelle is at an NA meeting and talking about his struggles with weed. And Bob Saget stands up and says, "You ever suck dick for weed? Because I've sucked dick for coke." And people were like, holy shit. At the time, people were like, what the fuck? It would be like watching, Barney say that. It was, people were stunned by it. And then the next one was his character in Entourage when he lives next to Vincent Chase and says, "Don't you fuck my daughters?" And he's doing drugs and banging hookers, and he's this wacky character. But that is not Bob Saget. Bob Saget's a very nice, sensitive guy. There was no really when we record this, we're still not 100% sure how he died. I don't think, but there's no rumors of drugs. They ruled out drugs and all that sort of thing. So the reality of Bob Saget became, like we said, because of, Gilbert and because of Half Baked and Entourage, we made it into this thing that he is this filthy human being, which was never the case. And I think that hurt Bob Saget a lot. And you hear there where he's even kind of, hesitant to say rape. Where, you know what I mean?
Like, say it.
Yeah, and that's on a podcast. He could have easily, there's no language restrictions. He just didn't want to say it there because I think that genuinely hurt him. So that to me is the more interesting dichotomy than people saying, like, can you believe he was on Full House and he says queef in his HBO special? But the real dichotomy to me is that he has that raunchy act, but is genuinely a sensitive, caring guy. You know what I mean? So that I think was a struggle for him as well when he would see shit like that online, whereas Gilbert would find that funny.
Yeah.
If there was an online campaign saying Gilbert raped and killed a girl, he'd be like, yeah, I did. So what? But yeah, I found that very interesting from Saget. And unfortunate that, people feel the need to do that shit because it's interesting where, like, people online see, this is where Opie and Anthony and shows like, he mentioned Opie and Anthony in that clip, shows like that, and Howard Stern, where you're ball busting. In a lot of ways, that ruined the environment around comedy, and I think contributed to a lot of the shit we see on social media and stuff now, because people don't get the joke. When you hear Gilbert saying that on the roast, or you hear guys busting balls on the radio or on Tough Crowd or whatever, or on podcasts now, when you hear that element, you as a listener feel like part of that. So a lot of those people that are...
This is hitting close to home.
Well, I'm trying to teach you here. Whereas a lot of the... Like, when you see shit on Twitter and you're like, why is this guy criticizing me? The reality is they think they're in on the joke with you.
Most people are.
And, it's very
Certain
weird.
people aren't.
But they all are in a way. It's just how you handle it. But what people forget is... None of them are in on the joke, technically.
Right.
You know what I mean? A lot of them make it work.
If you're in the room,
the same way a heckler can be funny at a comedy club.
Yeah.
Like a heckler yelling out, fuck you, can turn into 10 minutes of hilarious material from the comedian. However, it's not ideal. You know what I mean? And it's not part of the show as much as they think it is.
Yeah.
So it's a tough dynamic because... the person just wants to be part of something that they feel like a part of as a listener. And it's almost a compliment to Bob Saget or Opie and Anthony or whoever that they've made you feel comfortable enough that you're in on it. But you forget that those people don't know you.
Bobby Kelly used to talk about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, but
he used to get really affected by that because he's like, your fans are monsters.
Yeah. Well, and it's always like Bobby, Voss and Norton can make fun of him being fat.
Yeah.
But when some stranger is like, hey, you fat slob.
Exactly.
And again, I can understand. So you're like, what? Why are you?
Why are you saying this?
Because they look at it as someone who's in on the joke, shitting on you in that way.
You're playing a character.
Bobby Kelly looks at it as a stranger walking up to you and saying, hey, fat fuck, how you doing? Hey, you unfunny slob. And you're like, whoa. It would be the same as if someone walked up to you in a Walgreens and said it. You're like, where's this coming from?
It's one of the things they always used to talk about when people would go and meet E-Rock. They'd be like, you're not as fat as they say you are.
Well, I've gotten some of that too. Yeah. So it's funny, and I wonder, maybe I think that, comedians that were born in the last 5 years or 10 years, whatever, I think they'll be much better at handling it. But it's been a very tough thing for people that didn't grow up with the internet necessarily to adapt to, All right, what do we have next, Matthew?
So we have the jokes on Norm Macdonald Live.
Let's hear that. So I think Saget, what he was best at was being a straight man for guys like Norm. I think he was tremendous. Another thing he was good at, before we get into that, is just being him, Gilbert, and Norm in a very different way. Norm did this in a totally unique, brilliant way. But I think Saget and Gilbert... Oh, and you know what? Saget, Gilbert, and Artie Lang, I think are maybe the three best at this. Taking a joke that is made early on in an interview and killing it in a beautiful way. You know what I mean? Bringing it up.
Yeah.
If you say some dumb thing... make some joke about Gilbert being gay at the beginning of an interview, they will circle back to that 45 times in a 49-minute interview. They're great at that and killing it in a way that makes it funny, and then you're like, all right, we got it, and then bringing it back to being funny again. Saget's great at that, but I thought he was also great at being a straight man to Norm.
Oh,
and,
hell yeah.
Here are a couple examples of that.
So it's time to do jokes.
Norm, if you're not familiar with the joke segment on Norm's old talk show, which in my opinion is the greatest talk show that's ever existed, Norm Macdonald Live, Norm would write jokes that he would tell some, but he would write them and have his guests tell some.
Tell them.
Jokes.
Yeah. Two businessmen bought the Milwaukee Bucks for $550 million. They are very excited with their purchase, as this is the only legal way to own black people. Now that is here, and I read that.
Well, you're not there. You know how businessmen are racist?
They are.
Yeah, so it's them being racist.
They
not
are.
You.
The two businessmen that bought the Milwaukee Bucks for $550 million are racist, according to this.
They're fine, man.
And I think Saget's delivery of that is hilarious because he does it in a way where he finds it funny that Norm is making him read that, but also knows it's funnier if he shows some sort of like hesitance. Like, I don't want to say this, Norm. Why are you making me say it? Like, he's very in on the joke.
The sideways
and he was
look.
great at that. Yeah.
It's perfect. Like,
this is another one.
This is one. So this is Saget. And this is, I think, genuinely him being caught off guard by how hilarious Norm is. But this is him telling Saget met Dean Martin not long after he lost a child. And he's telling that story of when he met Dean Martin.
You asked me who was in the presence of
Dean Martin at Hamburger Hamlet.
You know everything about
That's what I
me.
meant. That's where I saw him. Was it Hamburger Hamlet?
Yeah, I didn't
That's where
know.
I saw him also.
We must have talked about it too.
I don't know. Well, he'd always be at Hamburger
And
Hamlet.
I walked in there and he had lost his son, and he was nice, and I just went,
I found your son.
Saget just looks down and Norm goes, Bob Saget, everybody. And they end the show. I found your son.
So good.
That made me choke. I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, they're the greatest. And I mean, Norm had that relationship with a few people. But I think Saget was one of the best at reacting to Norm. Do we have any other clips before we get out of here, man?
So
or before we start wrapping up?
So we have the other Gilbert Gottfried clip, but it's essentially the same thing. Him doing that joke. It's like he's like don't loiter. He's like contact the police. He's like, why are you gossiping? That one.
Let's hear a little bit of that, just because you can hear him and Gilbert together.
Holy fuck.
Him and Gilbert have talked about that a bunch in the past, but his most recent interview with him was only like 4 months ago, or 5 as this comes out. But he would bring it up with Gilbert and say, at the roast when you ruined my life in so many ways. So Saget, while that hurt him, he was always in on the joke. And again, that's how I'll remember the guy and why I liked him very much. And no matter what you think of his comedy, I do think of him as a true comedian. And that's what I'm finding more and more about people that I might not necessarily like their comedy, but I now care more about like what they meant to comedy and how they understood comedy and things like that. And just being involved with dirty work will always make Saget one of the greats.
Yeah. The antithesis of that is what we talked about on a previous episode or maybe on Blind Mike Project with Jeff Garlin, like putting his nose up at Legion of Skanks and Skankfest.
And by the way, like a month later, getting kicked off the Goldbergs for sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Perhaps he knew that was coming and wanted to kind of protect himself.
Yeah.
But that was amazing too, because Jeff Garlin, who was at Saget's roast actually, has been on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, right. It was that was
Larry David says horrible shit. It's weird, but that's what Hollywood does to a lot of people, and that's why I commend Saget, because he never stopped being a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Nikki Glaser, who wrote a song. Have you heard that yet, Mike? I don't know.
No, I've avoided it.
There's a tribute song out there to Bob Saget, and Nikki Glaser wrote just a very serious song and didn't see why it was ridiculous. It's very douche chilly. It's disgusting.
I don't want
to. Saget, I believe, if he were alive, would be very diplomatic and nice about that. But maybe say to Nikki, like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that for me. Because what happens in Hollywood to a lot of people, and there's a million examples, Amy Schumer, Patton Oswalt, Jimmy Kimmel, Sarah Silverman. Those are my go-to examples, but there's, tons more.
A ton.
They get sucked in by Hollywood. If there's ever been a person who should get sucked in by Hollywood, it would be Bob Saget. Because no one knew him as a comedian. He could have just avoided that identity entirely as a dirty comedian. No one really knew him as that. And but he just loved that environment. He loved being friends with comedians. And he loved laughing and making people laugh in a way that you couldn't say, well, hey, you're the dad on Full House, so you're not allowed to be that anymore. I think he would have chosen comedy, whereas a lot of these other people, Seth Rogen has chosen fame over being a funny guy.
Right.
And so I credit Saget a lot for not ever getting sucked into that, maintaining who he is, and still being able to do both at the same time, really. So I don't know. Anything else about Robert Saget before we get out of here?
We got the closer of the roast.
Yeah, we'll end on that. Norm, while he was always very silly, was 2 times I can think of where he was very genuine, and one of those is with David Letterman, who he respected a lot and helped out his career, and the other was with Bob Saget. So we'll hear that here. Me and Nikki Glazer make sure to capitalize on the death of Bob Saget. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, go to patreon.com/blindmike if you enjoyed this episode. Get all these episodes a week early. Mike Harris, you can find on Very Good Show that he does with the Craigster and another Matt. And, go to, if you want to do a podcast yourself or film something, whatever, come to Vaulted Podcast in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, vaultedpodcastri.com, or just hit up Matt from RI on Twitter, and he'll get you hooked up here. And Norm, take it away. Rest in peace, Bob.